الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Talkhis Nukhbatul Fikr by one of the Mashaykh of contemporary times, and this particular talkhis or summary, it is the work, the asl of the book, it goes back to the book of Nukhbatul Fikr by Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala. And we've been discussing concerning matter that it relates to Hadeeth al-Mardud. So Hadeeth that are classified or deemed to be Hadeeth al-Mardud, which is Hadeeth al-Daif, that we have covered that discussion regarding Hadeeth al-Daif. Then he lists regarding concerning Hadeeth al-Daif, that the asbab, that the reason for Hadith, that why it is considered to be daif or why it fall into daf, weakness, is because of two primary reasons. He mentioned one of those primary reasons, saqt fil isnad, that there's a breakage in the isnad, so inconsistency regarding and connection of the isnad, where someone narrators are missing. And the second reason he mentioned that tan for rawat, and the second reason is a criticism of some of the narrators. So those are the reason regarding of the asbab, the reason a hadith are considered to be daif. So then the author, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, then he started to list some of those primary reasons why the hadith is said to be daif, regarding saqt fil isnad. So he had mentioned, so the ulama have clarified regarding saqt fil isnad, that either it is something which is zahir, that saqt is something which is apparent, where you find that and that would find in the category regarding hadith that we're discussing, hadith al-mu'allaq, hadith al-mursal, and the likes. Then also you find case which is hadith which is considered to be as saqt khafi, which I discussed concerning al-mursal, khafi, and the likes will fall into that category. But overall, that we are discussing cases where a hadith are said to be daif due to there's a narrator, there's a inconsistency in the isnad, by way of there's a breakage in the isnad. So we have discussed in the first of these reasons hadith al-muhallaq, and discussed concerning hadith al-mu'allaq, what is hadith al-mu'allaq, and also hukum hadith al-mu'allaq, the reason why it's said to be dismissed or hadith weak. And also we discuss cases where mu'allaq that they may occur, and the discussion regarding hadith al-mu'allaq is that those hadith that are mentioned in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, that are few in Sahih Muslim, but more so in Sahih Bukhari and also in other books of hadith. But the ulama give more of a discussion, more emphasis on this topic in relation to Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. More so Bukhari, based upon those two collection that their authors, that they place as a condition for their book, as a criteria for their book, that all that is mentioned is Sahih. So why is it hadith al-mu'allaq appears within their books? And we had mentioned that discussion and discussed that discussion. So today, bi'awn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll continue regarding hadith asbab as-saqt fil isnad, where the author here he mentioned regarding concerning in this talkhis, he mentioned as-saqt akhir sanad, where saqt that occur in the the end of the hadith. So we discuss at the beginning of the hadith by way of the author, the collector, then also saqt, that a form of breakage have occurred in the isnad, where disconnection occurred at the side of the sahaba, the side of it, the sahaba, which is the akhir isnad, at the end of the isnad. So the beginning and then also at the end of the isnad. And at the end of the isnad he mentioned it referred to hadith al-mursal. So hadith al-mursal mentioned as-saqt akhir sanad, al-mursal yanqasim ila mursal as-sarih wa mursal al-khafi. So he mentioned regarding that, so he state that this it fall into mursal into two areas, mursal as-sarih, clear mursal, and also mursal al-khafi, and that which is mursal, which is one which is that that is hidden. Then he mentioned at-tarif ashhur lil mursal as-sarih. So regarding that, the more renowned or the more famous of what is said hadith mursal as-sarih, that he mentioned ما سقط من آخر إسناد من بعد التابعي فيكون الذي سقط إما تابعي أو صحابي. وقد يطلق العلماء كلمة المرسل على مطلق الانقطاع سواء كان في أول إسناد أو في آخره أو في إثنائه. وصورته. So you mentioned that not by way of the definition, ta'rif of hadith al-mursal, and we'll discuss that, pick up on that further. So ta'rif hadith al-mursal, we'll discuss it by the linguistic and also what is said by the ulama as to what the ulama have mentioned regarding what is hadith al-mursal istilahan in the ulama al-hadith. Then also he mentioned suratuhu, and yaqul at-tabi'i, that a tabi saying قال رسول الله عليه السلام, that a sahabi saying the Prophet عليه السلام have said such and such. مثاله عن عطاء النبي عليه السلام صلى على ابنه إبراهيم وهو 70 ليلة. That عطاء stated upon the Prophet عليه السلام, عطاء من التابعين, that he stated that the Prophet عليه السلام he prayed for his son Ibrahim, and he was ابن 70 ليلة, and he was that he passed away after at the age of 70 nights. Then he mentioned حكمه ضعيف. مسألة في حكم مرسل الصحابي. Then he mentioned the next matter, which is مرسل الصحابي. حكمه صحيح لأن الصحابة كلهم عدول. That all the مرسل الصحابي, that all are the ulama pass the judgment that it is hadith which is sahih. It is considered a mursal sahih, that is sahih, based upon all the companions, all the sahaba are said to be udul. Then I mentioned mithaluhu, then he went into that matter. And that will be then I mentioned mithaluhu hadith Aisha رضي عنها حين ورت قصة بدء الوحي. We mentioned that as a case of this, hadith of this, of mursal sahabi, the case regarding Aisha رضي عنها, that she mentioned in the hadith that relates to the start of creation. وهي لم تكن مولودة يومها, that she was not born then. During that she was not born when that hadith was mentioned. So overall, that we'll be discussing, as the author here mentioned, hadith al-mursal and some of the masail that relates to it. So he mentioned several cases or several masail that relates to ta'rif al-hadith al-mursal, surat hadith al-mursal, the type of what falls into this, examples, the ruling, and also he went to mursal as-sahaba. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll now begin that discussion with a little more detail. So of the first of those things that are discussed in hadith. So hadith al-mursal, which he mentioned that hadith al-mursal, when you use hadith al-mursal, when it's used in general hadith al-mursal as-sariyah. Hadith al-mursal as-sariyah. So that is what is intended. So hadith al-mursal, which is of those sucked, which is, as they mentioned, zahir, which is somewhat more apparent. It's more apparent regarding this type of breakage that occur in the isnad. So as for the ulama regarding a hadith that I've discussed concerning hadith al-mursal, that what they have mentioned of this, mursal lugatan. So what is meant by mursal lugatan according to the language? Overall, I mentioned that hadith al-mursal, that the word mursala, or the word from rasala, from the word rasala, can have different meaning, regarding that particular work. It means itlaq, atlaqa. So kind of somewhat it means concerning that something that it is something which is atlaqa, that you have left something to go. So the person putting something which is left to go. So that is concerning hadith itlaq. So letting something, releasing of something. So releasing of something, atlaqa, so let something go without any form of restriction, then that is hadith that is said to be mursal. So that's the meaning linguistically. Also they mentioned that from rasala that can mean tafriq, taqti'. So it can mean taqti', wa tafriq also can have the meaning of taqti', of cutting something, wa at-tafriq, or separating of things. So they mentioned regarding ja'a qawm irsalan. So ja'a qawm irsalan, that a group of people, they come irsal, meaning after each other. They came after each other. They came after each other. So not come all together, but they came after each other separately. So those are the meaning linguistic regarding Hadith al-Mursal. We'll now go into the second matter, which is Hadith al-Mursal istilahan. So Hadith Mursal istilahan, the ulama, they have a discussion regarding what is meant by Hadith al-Mursal istilahan inda ulama al-Hadith. So you have several definitions that are given regarding Hadith al-Mursal. So you have several definitions that are mentioned of Hadith al-Mursal, that of those definitions that are given, that they mentioned that first of those definition given, they said ما هو ما رواه التابعي كبير عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Hadith al-Mursal, according to some of the definition given by some of the ulama of Hadith, that they state Hadith al-Mursal هو ما رواه التابعي الكبير عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. So that's concerning Hadith al-Mursal, which is what is meant by this, that ما رواه تابعي كبير, that which have been narrated by a tabi'i kabir, that a senior tabi'i upon the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, upon the Prophet alayhi salam. So that's concerning that is what is meant, what of the definition given as Hadith al-Mursal. So for them it is a narration by a senior tabi'i upon the Prophet alayhi salam. So a tabi'i, that is one who have met the Sahaba. So a tabi'i is one who have met the Sahaba and died upon Islam. One who have met the Sahaba, was a Muslim and died upon Islam. That's a tabi'i. So someone who met the Sahaba, and more so one who learned from the Sahaba, Muslim and died upon Islam. That's a tabi'i, and we'll discuss that further inshallah ta'ala when this is discussed again. But overall, that is the one who said to be a tabi'i, one who met a Sahaba, Muslim and died upon Islam. Then that's one who said to be a tabi'i. And we use the word a tabi'i, we said a successor. Tabi'i, the one who's a follower of, or one who came after the Sahaba, or the generation after the Sahaba. As for this definition of Hadith al-Mursal, Riwayat al-Kibar al-Tabi'in, a narration of a major or a senior tabi'i upon the Prophet Islam, then that is what is mentioned as a Hadith al-Mursal. And so they mentioned that Yaqul ibn Abdul Barr, that they mentioned that Ibn Abdul Barr, so as for that you said that they mentioned that that's somewhat amal ijma in the muhaddithin. So that what is mentioned there regarding who said to be a tabi'i, that's an area where that's an ijma between the ulama of hadith, that constitute what is said to be Hadith al-Mursal, where a kibar, a senior tabi'i narrates upon the Prophet Islam. So take into account that a tabi'i is one who met a Sahaba. The tabi'i did not directly meet the Prophet Islam. So a tabi'i did not meet the Prophet Islam, but they came into contact with the Sahaba, the Prophet Islam companions. So between the tabi'i is the companions, and the tabi'i did not meet the Prophet Islam directly. So they mentioned, Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned, فَأَمَّا الْمُرْسَلْ فَإِنَّ هَذَا اسم أوقعوه بإجماع على حديث التابعي الكبير أن النبي عليه السلام مثل أن يقول عبد الله ibn Adi ibn Khiyar, or and he mentioned others. So generally mentioned that definition that ulama of hadith is in agreement that is said to be Hadith al-Mursal, that will constitute Hadith al-Mursal. So as for another definition that is mentioned, the second definition of Hadith al-Mursal, Hadith al-Mursal هو ما رواه التابعي مطلقا. So the second definition of a tabi'i is a narration by a tabi'i without making a distinction whether him being the tabi'i being a senior or a minor tabi'i. So any tabi'i narration upon the Prophet Islam that is said to be Hadith Mursal. So any tabi'i narrating upon the Prophet Islam, this is constitute a Hadith al-Mursal. So whether that tabi'i is classed as a senior tabi'i or a minor tabi'i or other than this. So that tabi'i we're saying, Qala Rasulullah alayhi salam, so any tabi'i saying that narrated upon the Prophet Islam directly, then this is said to be a Hadith Mursal. So they do not per se made as a requirement. It has to be a major, a senior or a minor. Any Sahaba, any tabi narration is classed as Mursal. Contrary to the first view, they make a distinction between they only constitute a senior tabi. So that view is mentioned by some of the ulama. A third opinion, huwa hadith that they give, huwa hadith alladhi lam yattasil isnaduhu ala ayyi wajhin kan al-inqita'uhu. That of those who gave a third opinion or definition of hadith al-mursal, where they state that hadith al-mursal, that is a narration that it has a breakage at any part of the isnad. So a mursal is that narration that have a breakage at any section, any part of the hadith, whether at the start, the middle, or the end. So any form of inqita, breakage, then that constitute being hadith al-mursal. And I mentioned that definition is more awsa, is much more broader compared to others. So any breakage that occur in the isnad is considered to be hadith mursal, according to this definition. And this will include hadith, what is referred to, I will discuss further to come, hadith al-munqata, hadith al-mu'dal, hadith al-mu'allaq, hadith al-mudallis, and the like. So any breakage that occurs in the hadith, in the isnad, at any point is considered to be hadith al-mursal. That's a more general definition that is given by some of the ulama as to what is hadith al-mursal. So for them, it is not specific, particular to a tabi'i. It is much more broader than this. And that's a ta'rif that they mentioned by some of the fuqaha. So they mentioned that this definition is one that is mentioned by some of the fuqaha and the ulama ashab usul al-fiqh wa Khatib al-Baghdadi. So this definition is the one mentioned by the fuqaha, the jurists, ashab usul al-fiqh, and also Khatib al-Baghdadi, who died 463 al-Hijri. And I mentioned Jama'a min al-Mu'addithin, and also a group amongst the Mu'addithin who also take this view, this opinion as to what is defined as hadith al-mursal. Any breakage in the isnad is mursal at any point in the isnad. Amongst the ulama of hadith that is mentioned, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, who died 198. So Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, 198. Also amongst them, Yahya ibn Ma'in, who died 233 al-Hijri, so 233 al-Hijri, and Ali ibn Madini, Ali ibn al-Madini, who died 234, and also a fourth that is mentioned, Abu Zur'a al-Razi, that those of the Mu'addithin, those who take the position that al-Mursal is any breakage in the isnad. So Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he mentioned in his book Al-Kifaya, قال لا خلاف بين أهل العلم, that there is no difference between the ulama of ilm, أن إرسال al-hadith, that more hadith which is said to be irsal. So where the use of irsal, mursal, the plural, marasil or marasil. So those of the meaning or those words are used, mursal, irsal, marasil, and the likes. So they mention irsal, then he mentioned لا خلاف بين أهل العلم أن إرسال الحديث الذي ليس بمدلس, that a person who narrates such an hadith who is not a mudallis, وهو رواية, then he mentioned هو given a definition of Hadeeth al-Mursal. هو رواية الراوي is a narration of a narrator. أمن لم يعاصره, a narrator narrating upon someone he did not, was a contemporary to him. أو لم يلقه, or he did not meet him, or he did not يلقاه, and he did not meet that person. نحو رواية سعيد بن المسيب, أبي مسلمة ابن عبد الرحمن, عروة ابن زبير, محمد ابن منكدر, والحسن البصري. Then start to list a name of people they mentioned. وغيره من التابعين عن رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام, people who are tabi'in upon the Prophet Islam. So he mentioned regarding concern to note that these are cases that they ought to be cases of Hadeeth al-Mursal, that a person narrate upon someone he did not, was a contemporary to that person, nor of a person that he met. So that they mentioned it applies to across the board. Then I mentioned An-Nawawi, he mentions al-Mursal عند الفقهاء وأصحاب الأصول, that Hadeeth al-Mursal according to the فقهاء وأصحاب الأصول وخطيب البغدادي والخطيب الحافظ أبي بكر البغدادي وجماعات من المحدثين, and also some of the محدثين, I will mention some of their names. ما انقطع إسناده على أي وجه كان انقطاعه فهو عندهم بمعنى منقطع. So it's mentioned that An-Nawawi, he mentions that what is stated as Hadeeth al-Mursal, as in his book Sharh al-Sahih Muslim, that he mentioned that Mursal in the Fuqah wa Ashabul Usul wal Khatib Hafid Abi Bakr al-Baghdadi wa Jama'at min al-Muhaddithin, that they mentioned that Hadeeth al-Mursal is what is a breakage in the isnad at any point. Then they mentioned that then it is a focus that is munqata. So that would be Hadeeth al-Munqata with some of the ulama, as we'll discuss. So Hadeeth al-Mursal with them will equate Hadeeth Munqata. Even Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, who died 456, قال المرسل من حديث, that defining Mursal min Hadeeth, هو حديث هو الذي سقط بين أحد رواته وبين النبي عليه السلام ناقلا واحد فسائد وهو منقطع أيضا. So you can somewhat also Ibn Hazm that have the view that Hadeeth al-Mursal is the same as Hadeeth al-Munqata. So if a breakage take place at any point is considered to be Hadeeth al-Mursal, which will be Munqata. So for Ibn Hazm and a group of Muhaddithin, and we mention Ali ibn Madini, Abu Zur al-Razi, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qahtan, Yahya ibn Ma'in, among the ulama of Hadith, Kibar ulama of Hadith, and also others, that they see that Hadeeth al-Mursal is also Hadeeth al-Munqata, that a breakage have occurred at some point in the isnad. So they mentioned that with this view that you find the books of some of the ulama who have written of the classical books on the topic of Hadeeth al-Marasil, that they refer to as that such as Marasil, the Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, that you find that in those books that any form of anqita is classed as Marasil. So the breakage may occur at any point, but it will be mentioned in that book of Marasil by Abu Hatim al-Razi, as they see that Marasil much a more general, a more broader definition. Also, you'll find that the book of Marasil of Abu Dawud al-Sijistani, Sahib al-Sunan Abu Dawud, that died 275, that also in his book Marasil, that also you find that a much more broader definition of Hadeeth of Mursal that he mentioned, where he mentioned in that book also al-Mudallis Hadeeth Asanid Munqata. So they cannot that, so those who have authored on that topic, that they perceived Hadeeth al-Mursal as much broader, where any form of inqita is said to be classed as within Marasil. So overall, you have other definitions that are given. Of some I've mentioned it, you have many other definitions that are given regarding Hadeeth or other definition that are given by Hadith of Hadith al-Mursal, where some have mentioned that Hadith al-Mursal, that it goes up to over 13 definitions. Over 13 definition is mentioned by the ulama. But we mentioned those ones as, so these are Hadith, so Ibn Hajar and others who have mentioned that Hadith al-Mursal, that they have mentioned that Hadith al-Mursal, that the definition is said to be the more correct definition that is mentioned. Ta'rif al-Mu'tabar, the one that considered to be the more appropriate definition for Hadith al-Mursal, that they have mentioned as that of Ibn Hajar, Ibn Salah, and of those who have mentioned that, of some who have said concerning ma rawahu, so of the definition they mentioned that ma rawahu fihi atabihi and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what has been narrated by the Prophet about a tabihi upon the Prophet Islam, that is said to be a Hadith al-Mursal. That so they mentioned that the more the definition that is given, that they have stated that the overall, that final definition, as they mentioned, that would be as stated ma adafahu. So the definition that is now said to be the more appropriate definition, ma adafahu at-tabihi ila Nabi alayhi salam, that what a tabihi have attributed to the Prophet alayhi salam, qawlan, of his statements, fi'lan or takrir or sifa. So a tabi'i narrating upon the Prophet alayhi salam regarding something he have said, or the Prophet ﷺ have done, or the Prophet ﷺ have agreed upon, or allowed, or something of his description. So anything where a tabi'i is narrating it back to the Prophet ﷺ directly, then that is said to be Hadith al-Mursal. That is Hadith al-Mursal. So that's the one that is more in line regarding what is mentioned by Ibn Hajar and some of the ulama, as to what is said to be Hadith al-Mursal. So, ما أضافه التابعي إلى النبي عليه السلام قولا فعلا تقريرا أو صفة. That's Hadith al-Mursal. So, as a tabi'i narrating upon the Prophet عليه السلام directly, and it means that, as I mentioned, to know that as we discussed, so that's concerning what is said to be Hadith al-Mursal. The next of the matter to be discussed regarding Hadith al-Mursal, that some of the ulama have highlighted this matter, was not included. So as to certain cases, so he mentioned regarding concern to know that example of Hadith al-Mursal. So for example, Atabihi Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Qatada, Hassan al-Basri, قال رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. Then that's Hadith al-Mursal. And Sa'id ibn Musayyib and Rasulullah alayhi salam, then that's Hadith al-Mursal. Hassan al-Basri narrated direct upon the Prophet alayhi salam, that is Hadith al-Mursal. Qatada narrated upon the Prophet alayhi salam directly, Hadith al-Mursal. Nafi' narrated upon the Prophet alayhi salam directly, Hadith al-Mursal. So those are a case of Hadith al-Mursal. Whether they mention something that the Prophet is supposed to have said, or have done, or have allowed, or a description, then all this is Hadith al-Mursal. The fact that is being narrated, transmitted by a tabi'i, the one who have met a sahaba, but did not meet the Prophet ﷺ, then that is Hadith al-Mursal. They're transmitting, a tabi'i transmitted something upon the Prophet ﷺ directly, that's Hadith al-Mursal. Whether it is kibar, a senior, or a senior major tabi'i, or of one who is said to be of a minor tabi'i, or of a mutawassit, or of the middle tabi'i, any tabi'i is included. They mention certain cases that are not included, but one to be mindful of. This more advanced or something that's to be more mindful of. That I mentioned certain cases where it is not included as Hadith al-Mursal. So to be mindful of this. The first of those cases, Surah تدخل في المرسل وظاهر اتصال, that sometimes is included in Mursal, and from what is there that's seen, what is apparent, it seemed to be muttasil, with a connected chain. They mention here a riwayah, and riwayah man raha Nabi al-Islam, a narration upon a person who saw the Prophet al-Islam, walam yasma minhu shay, but that individual did not hear anything from the Prophet al-Islam. So someone who saw the Prophet al-Islam, but that person did not hear anything from the Prophet ﷺ. Then I mentioned that, as for those cases, that person is said to be a Sahaba, but we have seen the Prophet ﷺ. But what about his narrations? He saw the Prophet ﷺ, but did not hear anything from the Prophet ﷺ directly. He is classed as Sahaba. But regarding his riwayah, as for his narration that they mentioned, the ulama mentioned, they mentioned regarding that, is considered to be a Sahaba. But as for his narration, I mentioned his narration is said to be min qabil al-Mursal. That his narration is said to be from the qabil of Mursal. So this person did not hear from the Prophet ﷺ. So it would be different from a case where a Sahabi saw the Prophet ﷺ, heard from him, but he may narrate things, as we'll discuss, through other Sahaba. Then that's a different case. Those are two separate cases. The first, the case that we are discussing here, a person saw the Prophet ﷺ, but didn't hear anything from him. That person is said, classed as a Sahaba, but as for his narration upon the Prophet ﷺ, things that he didn't hear directly, or didn't hear anything from the Prophet ﷺ, then his narration are considered to be classed as Marasil. Considered as Marasil. Where it is not considered to be Muttasil. It's not considered to be with a continuous chain going back, ending with the Prophet ﷺ. So his narration will be considered to be Min al-Kibar at-Tabi'in. His narration will be considered to be Min al-Kibar at-Tabi'in. In that level, his narration would be classed on that level. I mentioned an example regarding جعدة ابن حبيرة حيث ولدت في حياة النبي الإسلام وله رؤيا. So this Sahabi جعدة ibn Hubira, that he was where he saw the Prophet ﷺ as a baby, ولكن لم يسمع منه شيء, but he did not hear anything from the Prophet ﷺ. As he was born, he was a baby, so he didn't hear anything, but he saw the Prophet ﷺ, so he's considered a Sahaba. But as for his narration, it's counted as Marasil. And I mentioned others, who was Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr as-Siddiq حيث ولد عام حجة الوداع. So it is Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr as-Siddiq, that he was born in the last year, the year of the Prophet ﷺ performing Hajjat al-Wada, performing his farewell Hajj. So he was a baby, didn't hear anything directly. Would his narration be considered to be equal to that of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, wa Omar, wa Uthman, wa Abu Hurairah, and the likes? Did I mention that? He's a Sahabi, but his narration are looked upon, or are treated as that of the class of Hadith al-Marasil, Kibar al-Tabi'in. Another case that they mention, that from what is apparent seem to be muttasil, وهي معضلة, where I mentioned that mu'dala, it have several breakage that have occurred. Here riwayah man lahu ru'ya, that one who have seen لبعض الصحابة, one who have seen some of the Sahaba, ولم يسمع من أحد منهم, and did not hear from any among the Sahaba. So a person who met the Sahaba, so he'd be classed as a Tabi, but didn't hear anything from him. Did not hear anything from him. So this shows regarding that, the case of Marasil, those Tabi'in that heard from a Sahaba. Those Tabi'in that heard from a Sahaba. So the case of a person who saw a Sahaba, but they did not hear anything of narrations from them, then as for those cases, they mentioned that those cases regarding that they consider to be from the Tabi'in. But as for the other ahkam regarding their narration, then their narration that it considered to be that not classed as marasil. It would not be included in the bab of marasil. That considered to be munqata'. So there's some inqita', and that so between them and the Prophet Islam would be several layers between them and the Prophet Islam, but overall that those are not considered to be of hadith al-marasil. That will not be classed in hadith al-marasil. So those are of those cases and others, but we mentioned these for now. Another matter regarding, as we said, hadith al-marasil, that hadith of Hassan al-Basri, narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ, and you have the narration of Sa'id ibn Musayyib, narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ, who Sa'id met many of the companions, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, and we'll discuss من التابعين كبار من أفضل التابعين, according to law, as to be mentioned, but his narration are considered to be not direct upon the Prophet ﷺ, so the class as marasil. Next, hukum hadith mursal. So hadith al-mursal, what's the hukum? The ulama on this matter, that they have mentioned aqwal. So hadith al-mursal hukum, hadith al-mursal, you have aqwal between the ulama. So you find the ulama of hadith wal fuqaha, they differ on hadith al-mursal. And of that concern, the hadith of the ulama of hadith, they look at the hadith regarding al-inqita' wal-ittisal. The fuqaha also look at hadith regarding inqita', but also regarding hujjiyah. So the fuqaha more concerned, they consider more concerned is the hadith can be used as a hujjah. So on this matter, so the ulama of hadith look at hadith regarding al-ittisad wal-inqita' wa as-sahih was-sakim, what is authentic of that which is not. And so on that line, the ulama, they differ regarding hadith المرسل. القول الأول مذهب الأول مذهب جمهور من المحدثون والجماعة من الفقهاء إلى أن حديث المرسل حديث مردود لا يحتج به مطلقا. So ذهب جمهور العلماء المحدثين والفقهاء وجماعة من الفقهاء that majority of the ulama of hadith and a group amongst the ulama of the fuqaha, that they take the position that hadith al-mursal, that is considered to be hadith which is classed as hadith al-daif, mardud, and not a hujjah, not to be used as a proof. So they have two positions. One, it is classed as hadith al-daif, hadith al-mursal, and second, not a form of hujjah. So after ulama who separate between this, hadith daif, hadith al-mursal, by way of it being, is it authentic or not? And second, is it can be used as a proof? So you have those 2 points that are being mentioned, or two matters. Hadith al-mursal, is it considered to be hadith which is sahih, maqbool, or daif? And second, which category it falls into? And second, by way of hujjiyat hadith al-mursal. Can hadith al-mursal be used as an evidence? So the jumhur al-muhaddithin wa jama' min al-fuqaha, they take the position that hadith mursal is considered to be in the category of hadith daif, and second, la hujja fi, that it is not to be used as a hujja mutlaqa in any way. And that's the view that is mentioned by Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala, who died 261, فقال in his muqaddimah of his Sahih Muslim, and his muqaddimah, Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala, of those of the ulama that for their, of among kutubu sitta, that he had like an introduction to his book. So he had like an introduction before he goes into the main part of his book, and that introduction is referred to as muqaddimah Sahih Muslim. So the muqaddimah of Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala, that he mentions certain points regarding hadith, matters. So of those things he discussed, والمرسل من الروايات في أصل قولنا, that hadith al-mursal, that by way of riwayat, narrations, في أصل قولنا, and the asl as a principle, as a ruling regarding us, قول أهل العلم بالإخبار ليس بحجة, that's not considered to be hujjah. So you mentioned that قول أهل العلم بالأخبار concerning ulama of hadith ليس بحجة, is not a proof. Is not a proof. And by that, it is not sahih. So it's not considered to be hadith which is authentic hadith. It is said to be hadith which is da'if, mardud, and second, laysa bihujjah, is not a proof. Khatib al-Baghdadi, he mentioned hadith al-mursal, والذي نختاره الذي نختاره من هذه جملة سقوط الفر العمل بالمراسيل, that what we have chosen, what have been chosen, and what have been the decision is that to remove, to dismiss acting upon hadith al-marasil. So that's concerning وأن لأن حديث المرسل غير مقبول. And I mention لأن, because hadith al-mursal غير مقبولة, it is not accepted, it is not accepted. And as mentioned in his book Al-Kifaya في علم الرواية by Khatib al-Baghdadi alayhi rahmatullahi ta'ala. So those are the first opinion of the ulama, and they come to the conclusion based upon they see in making it, they mention that one, hadith al-mursal munqati' isnad, that is a break in the isnad. So according to the ulama of hadith, which is jumhur of ulama al-hadith, that hadith al-mursal, of the reason why is not it is considered to be mardud, rejected, and not a hujjah, because there's a breakage in the isnad. There's a breakage in the isnad, there's a fault in the isnad by way of it. It doesn't have that's not a continuous chain. There's a breakage. So it is not considered to be muttasil, and of the condition of hadith as-sahih, it is muttasil. It have a continuous chain. There's no breakage. So this forfeit that condition. And also second of the reason they mention الراوي المحذوف من الإسناد في الحديث المرسل مجهول العين وحال, that they discuss that the person also that is not mentioned, it could be a that is not mentioned, that is unknown in the isnad, that you don't know is affairs, you don't know who that person is. Is it someone acceptable, someone it is not, is unknown regarding the affairs of that narrator that is missing. So based upon this, the hadith is weak. So those are the reasons that they mentioned regarding hadith being authentic, and they have other reasons, but of the reason. The second opinion, ذهب إمام شافعي عليه رحمة الله تعالى, who died 204 الهجري, إلى احتجاج بحديث المرسل إذا توافرت فيه بعض الشروط. So Imam Shafi عليه رحمة الله تعالى take the position that hadith al-mursal is more so regarding the line of ihtijaj. So in the line of more ihtijaj بحديث المرسل إذا توافرت بعض الشروط, if it fulfills certain criteria, certain conditions. So they have laid out that hadith al-mursal can be used as a hujjah if it forfeits, if it fulfills certain conditions. So kind of somewhat, so Allahu alam, that hadith, that so they mentioned that it can be used as a hujjah, ihtijaj bihi. As for the matter regarding it being maqbool or mardud, then that's not mentioned per se, but they mentioned that of the points regarding hadith, so they have these shurut, condition for a person to use hadith al-mursal. So of the condition that they mention, أن يكون المرسل من كبار التابعين. So of the condition to use as a proof hadith al-mursal, that it must be narrated from a senior tabi'i. That's one of the conditions. As I mentioned, that sabab and ghalib, that they narrate upon the sahaba. The kibar, the senior tabi'i, in most part narrate upon upon a sahaba. So they mention that that's one of the condition. Another condition they mention أنه لا يخالف الثقات في عامة حديثي. That also that person is not known to contradict other thiqat. So also that narrator or the tabi is not known to go against other credible narrators. The third condition they mention أن يكون المرسل ممن يقول من يروي عن الثقات. That that person also is known, that tabi that is known generally that he only narrate upon people who are said to be thiqat. So that person should be known that he generally is known that he only narrates upon those that are said to be thiqat. That's his general practice. So that his practice is that he narrates upon those who are said to be thiqat. So he was somewhat careful as to who he narrates upon. So those are the conditions they mention regarding Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala regarding Hadith al-Mursal. So that, and also you have other condition that they mention that also that Hadith that you have other narration that supports it. Other narration that also support it, that can support that, also that is in line with qawl ba'd sahaba. That narration, it coincide with some of the statements of the Sahaba, some of the fatwa of some of the Sahaba. And also that I mentioned that with this of the condition that that Hadith al-Mursal, that also it is in line with the general amatul ulama fatwa of that the fatwa of the majority of the ulama. So that Hadith al-Mursal, that is in line with what have been mentioned by many of the ulama regarding their fatwa. So if the fatwa is in line with that Hadith al-Mursal, they'll accept it. Or many of the ulama have given fatwa on that line, based upon that hadith. So those are of the conditions that are mentioned, but they have conditions. The third opinion, that's some of the ulama, they mention من الحنفية إلى احتجاج بالحديث المرسل, also they have conditions. So of the ulama of the Ahnaf, who also take the position that احتجاج بالحديث المرسل with certain condition, condition. Where the condition is that Mursal, the narrator, min ahli qurn al-ula al-thalatha, that they are from the first three generations. That narration is taken from someone for the first three generation. The mention is that they said the Prophet Islam, and the reason for this they mention the Prophet Islam, I've made a tazkiyah, recommendation for the first three generations. So narration from the first three generation, that they give them, they look at it in a different way, more of acceptance of narration of the first three generation from the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, and Atba' at-Tabi'in. So anything from that time frame, they'll give it some merit. And use the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. The Prophet had mentioned the hadith, قال عليه السلام خير الناس قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the best generation is his generation, the one that came after, and the one that came after, which he mentioned, three generations. So they mentioned that marasid from that they give some concessions in accepting hadith that are said to be from the marasid of the first three generations. That's some of the ulama of the Ahnaf. Then of those who are fourth opinion regarding that, they mentioned that ذهب جماعة من الأئمة إلى قبول حديث المرسل والعمل به في الأحكام. That regarding hadith al-mursal, that it can be used in matters regarding ahkam. وأنه كالحديث المسند في وجوب العمل به. And it is like it is taken as that, it is taken like that of hadith which is said to be musnada. And of those who of that view, they mention Imam Abu Hanifa alayhi rahmatullahi ta'ala. So Abu Hanifa alayhi rahmatullahi ta'ala, who died 150, of the view that concerned the hadith al-mursal, that one can act upon them in matters regarding ahkam al-shar'iyyah. And they are likened to that of hadith al-musnada, and the person is required to act upon them. Also, so of those of that view, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik ibn Anas, who died 179, and also they are mentioned, and others who have followed them on that view from their madhahib. and also riwayah an Imam Ahmed, and also riwayah an Imam Ahmed who died 280, 241, who died 241. Abu Dawud al-Sijistani, alayhi rahmatullah ta'ala, he mentioned in his book Risala al-Mecca, وَأَمَّا الْمَرَاسِيلِ فقد, or he mentioned Abu Dawud that in his Risala al-Mecca he wrote وأما مراسيل فقد كان يحتج بها العلماء فيما مضى, that hadith al-marasil, the ulama before have used it as an evidence, مثل the dimension of the example Sufyan al-Thawri, Malik ibn Anas, وأوزاهي حتى جاء الشافعي. So the ulama, as he mentioned, Sufyan al-Thawri, Malik ibn Anas, Awzahi, used as an evidence حتى جاء الشافعي, until Imam Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala he came. فتكلم في ذلك, and he spoke about this matter, meaning Imam Shafi. وتابعه على ذلك أحمد بن حنبل وغيره, and others they follow him on this, where that they kind of put some Imam Shafi that kind of spoke about it and put some guidelines, that is mentioned by Sarkhasi, Saraskhi al-Hanafi, that he mentioned Marasil al-Qurn al-Thani والثالث حجة في قول علمائنا. So of the ulama the Ahnaf that mentioned that Marasil can be used as an evidence from the second and the third generation according to them. So that's the view that is taken by some of the ulama. A fifth opinion regarding Hadith al-Marasil, and this will be the last of those opinions I will mention, is that they have mentioned ذهب جماعة من العلماء إلى أن الحديث المرسل أصح وأقوى من حديث المسند المتصل. Again, من العلماء قال حديث المراسيل أقوى وأصح, that hadith al-mursal, marasil, that they are more authentic and stronger than that, or more sounder than that of hadith al-musnad al-muttasil. And they mention, the reason that they mention, the reason they give that the person of the imam who's narrating that mursal, then he's letting you that, that is giving that, that with certainty, he's narrating with certainty that hadith is authentic. That's why he's willing to drop some of the narrators, because of that certainty that he has regarding this hadith, that is willing to drop some of those narrators because of that level of trust and certainty. That's what they mention regarding that matter. But so that's a view taken by, are mentioned by some, a view mentioned of some. So that's the definition given regarding, or hukum hadith al-mursal. Overall regarding that hadith al-mursal, hadith al-munqata' is hadith said to be that is a breakage, as the qawl of jumhur ulama of hadith. Qawl jumhur ulama al-hadith and the fuqaha, that hadith al-mursal is said to be hadith al-mardud. It is classed as within the category of hadith is said to be da'if, based upon that there's a break in isnad, where that breakage one is unable to know the affairs, the state of that narrator who's missing. So there's missing narrators. So the hadith is said, so that forfeit of the condition of hadith al-maqbul muttasil. They mention a case regarding, it is as mentioned that if it is said to be the ada, what's the common practice of that tabi, أنه لا يرسل إلا عن الثقة, that he does not narrate except on a person said to be ثقة. لا يرسل إلا عن الثقة, that he only narrates on people said to be ثقة. So he's very careful as to those that he narrate upon. What's the state of his narration? Is it acceptable or not? And it's from the tabi'in. And ordinarily, he would narrate upon those that are thiqat. He's very mindful of this. Is that narration acceptable or not? It is stated that, ذهب جمهور المحدثين, that jumhur of the ulama of hadith, إلى توقف, that they kind of somewhat, that they take a precaution regarding those things. They're very cautious regarding that matter, where they don't reject completely nor accept completely. That a person, so they consider to be something tawakkuf, as there's ihtimal. So the person after start tawakkuf, that they have to look into the matter further. Look into the matter further. With some of the ulama of hadith. Of the matter they discuss regarding hadith al-mursal, that asbab al-irsal. Why people narrate hadith in this fashion, in this way. It is mentioned that of the reason regarding that one, that yakuna, that al-ikhtisar, that it is mentioned by ikhtisar, try to shorten the isnad, as you find that in those early days, that that attention wasn't given to isnad until later, then more attention was given to isnad. So at times they just want to go direct to the hadith. They want to go direct to the hadith. So they mentioned as also al-ikhtisar, so trying to summarize and go straight to the hadith, so they can somewhat skip the isnad and go straight to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's the reason of al-ikhtisar, of irsal. Also nisyan, that of nisyan, that he may have forgotten the isnad and just go straight to the, so he forget the isnad, but he still retain the hadith, the matan. So he may have forgot the isnad, but he still retain, still memorize, still have memory of the matan. So he'll go straight to the matan. So of the reason concerning an-nisyan. And also at times you find the ulama concerning that in the hadith, we mentioned concerning that لا يقصد برواية الحديث يعني تحديث. So one person, the person intend to narrate hadith, wasn't a lesson. It sometimes it is used regarding concerning that. So in those cases, it wasn't the person of a lesson of bab al-riwayah, but more so bab concerning that they mentioned concerning munazara was more of a debate, or mudhakara, that they were somewhat revising their hadith. So in those bab of mudhakira, revising the hadith between themselves, they go straight to the hadith. So they'll miss so the intention is not per se to mention the hadith with the remember tahdith, where the isnad will be mentioned under the matan. They intend for this other reason, so they'll drop the isnad and go straight to the matan. So those are the reasons behind, and other reasons that are mentioned, and other reasons that are mentioned. With that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop here. So this will be the first part in discussing hadith al-marasil or hadith al-mursal, or that we're discussing. As the author here mentioned, we have mentioned certain points. There's other points that still remain. So I have a general wider picture of the discussion regarding hadith al-mursal. So far we have covered matter regarding hadith al-mursal by way of why it is mentioned as hadith as the author mentioned, where there's a sakt. So it's included in those hadith that are said to be mardud, that are said to be weak, based upon that there's a breakage in the isnad. Why? There's a sakt in the isnad, and it occurs at the end of the hadith by way of the side of the sahaba. Hadith, we discussed the meaning linguistically and also istilahan. According to the ulama of hadith, so what's the hadith mursal with the ulama of hadith, that you have many definitions are given. I will mention over 13 definitions, but we will mention some of the more renowned of those definitions. And as for the actual meaning, the more correct, the more sounder meaning of hadith al-mursal mentioned, ما أضافه أتى به عن رسول الله عليه السلام قولا وفعلا وتقريرا وصفة. That's the definition of hadith al-mursal. ما أضافه أتى به. So anything that has been narrated by a tabi'i, and we said that tabi'i is one who met a sahaba, studied with him, heard narration from him, was a Muslim, and died upon Islam. So that's a tabi. So in that case, the tabi that narrates upon the Prophet Islam, that's said to be Mursal, where there's between him and the Prophet Islam a generation. Also, we discuss that what are not included and may be thought to be included in Marasil. So I mentioned two cases. A case that is not a part of the discussion or not to be included and may seem to be muttasil, a person who saw the Prophet Islam but did not hear anything from him. So I said in that case, that person considered to be a Sahaba by way of ru'ya, by viewing the Prophet Islam and being a Muslim and died upon Islam, but he did not hear anything from the Prophet Islam, so his narration are classed as that of Marasil, from Kibar at-Tabi'in. Another case where a person who met a Sahaba, said to be a Tabi who met a Sahaba, saw him and met him, but did not hear anything from him. Met the Sahaba, but did not hear anything from him of a hadith. So in that case, that hadith is not considered to be within the discussion of Marasil, so that is not included in this discussion. That's not included in this discussion. That were mentioned regarding that hukum, hadith al-Marasil, that are considered to be da'if, even though a khilaf between ulama. I will mention the aqwal of the ulama, but in the end result is qism min hadith da'if. So of the ulama make a distinction that's more correct regarding hadith al-Mursal by way of it being da'if, by way of saqt fil isnad. So it's considered to be da'if by way of there's a break in the isnad, and one is unaware regarding who are the missing link in the isnad. It could be. We find that a tabi sometimes narrate upon many tabi. In some cases, I mentioned that as ulama written that up in the case even a tabi narrate upon 6 tabi, even 7. So the most that have been recorded that a tabi sometimes narrate upon 6 or 7 individual among the tabi'in. So we're unclear as to who is missing, how many people is missing in that isnad. So that's of the reason the hadith. Then our next discussion regarding ihtijaj bi hadith al-mursal. Can it be used as an evidence? Then that's also our next discussion regarding hadith al-mursal. Regarding hadith al-mursal being fact al-ittisal, so it's considered to be hadith al-da'if, but also ihtijaj bihi, used as an evidence. And that's the next discussion regarding what is mentioned by some of the ulama. Ihtijaj wal-ittisal. Then we discuss regarding asbab al-irsal, and we discussed of the reason why a person might fall into this. So there's other things to be covered regarding marasil al-sahaba, maratib al-sahaba, maratib al-irsal, also maratib al-mursal, hadith, cases regarding marasil Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Hassan al-Basri, others are looked at. And also regarding that at times the word al-mursal, how it is used, meaning having a different meaning than what is said to be the more common meaning that we know it as today. And also books written on this topic. And so those things to be covered next regarding hadith al-mursal. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end this session. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.